Hey guys, this is Cameron AB, and I'm sitting down with my good friend Cory. Cory, why don't you talk a little bit about who you are and what you're all about?
Sure. My name is Cory Lingner. I was born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I feel like I have been performing for as long as I can remember. But I perform for a living. It's what I do. Um, and
What
it's
kind of
been
performance do you do? What kind is it?
primarily theater.
Uh,
That's the main thing. But I started, my very first thing I tried was a tap class when I was 4 years old.
and by
and
the
then,
way, and by the way, for all those who are listening, Cory is an amazing hoofer. Like,
um,
I gotta be honest with you. I took a couple classes, and then I see what you've done, and even though you've been doing it since you were four, like, it's amazing even getting to that level of hoofing.
oh gosh, thank you.
I remember growing up and watching Savion Glover perform. He would take tours and come through Philly, and I remember just like, how does he get so many beats in a sec? Like, how does he do it? And, I
Yeah,
mean, I mean,
it's
keep
true.
going.
Like
Yeah,
him and another big influence on me in terms of just wanting to, I was fascinated with the idea of tap was of Michael Flatley, actually, the
okay.
famous Irish dancer. And I had VHS tapes that I would watch of River Dance and Lord of the Dance and talk about a guy who would be able to create so many sounds in a second. I just found it so exciting to watch, and he just commanded the stage and all of that. So he was a big influence early on. But
I just remember the hair and like the deep V neck and the.
yeah. The shoulder breathing.
I loved it. Loved it. Oh my god. So now you're primarily a Broadway. That's
Yeah, yeah. I
you're
made the
exclusively
transition
Broadway.
from just being a dancer into the realm of musical theater,
Yeah.
and it's been quite exhilarating.
So for those who don't know, kind of tell us a little bit about like the lifestyle that like a Broadway performer would normally kind of have. Is it kind of like, you know, like a season, or is it all year round, or how much are you hustling, and what's the auditions like? So like
Oh, yeah,
it's a big question, but like just
for
whatever.
sure. And we can just dive right into it.
Yeah, go into it. Go into it.
Yeah, honestly, it depends on where you're at that moment, but the hustle is for sure there. And if any of you that are in New York or have visited, there is an energy there, and you are on the go, and especially in the arts and in theater or anything like that,
Energy.
are
That's the main.
are
Yeah.
yeah, full force going, moving forward, full on straight ahead. But the audition seasons, primarily in New York, the big waves have been in the fall
Mhm.
for any shows that are about to open up in that season, or late winter, early spring, so that whether it's a show opening in the spring or primarily a lot of summer regional shows that the
Yeah.
regional theaters will put on summer shows, they'll audition then, and they try to get all their shows cast and whatnot. Um, but yeah, and it also affects too if you are someone that's represented with agent or a manager, which thankfully I have an agent that I've been with since I graduated college, and they've been very helpful to me.
Wow.
But then there's other folks that might not have an agent or a manager and have to just look online, whether it's on playbill.com or backstage, or going to the equity website and trying to find those auditions where they think, oh, well, this is happening today, I can maybe squeeze in this call. And then also, if you are a member of Actors Equity or not, that also affects the probability of being seen, which is another hard thing, because there's
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of folks that do love theater and want to be a part of it. So that's where it gets really tough. But yeah, I've since moving to the city, there's a lot of auditions that I've been to, um, and then once you get that show, or once you get something like a Broadway show, um, the the scheduling feels different. You get into, whether you are starting with the show, which we can even dive into this too
Yeah.
as well. All of the shows I've been a part of have brought a unique experience of the theatrical way of life that we can get into. But whether you start with the show from the very beginning and have rehearsals with the entire company in that format,
Right.
or if you're a replacement where you are just one person that's filling in for a slot that's just opening up, so that you are in a much more contained setup where it's you and the dance captain or the associate director just in a studio, and then you get put on stage. We call them put-ins, where you're just like, here you go. Let's see if
Thrown into the fire.
you are in the environment, and then you're on. So you kind of have to really just go with the flow and see how it all works. But then once you're actually in the show, we go through what the norm in terms of Broadway is the 8 shows a week schedule. So there's 7 days in a week, but we do 8 shows. So it gets pretty taxing, but
The
you just
two-a-day.
gotta,
The
yeah.
two-a-day is not a good day.
Yeah.
Not a good day.
So you just have to, and everybody's process is different, but you just gotta truly do what you have to do, because your body is your instrument in this art form. So you have to kind of do all of the maintenance in whatever way you can. They'll, depending on the show and who it's producing it, they will provide certain things like physical therapy at the theater to kind of help. And this is not just for more dancer performers, but also vocalists that need muscle relaxing techniques on their muscles around their vocal cords and all of that sort of thing. So there's that. But then, yeah, people will try to cross train by taking other dance classes or yoga or Pilates. There's also different forms of trying to treat your body, which for me, actually, after which show did I start doing it on? I believe it was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And we can definitely get into that show too.
Yeah.
But I actually discovered and have been now a huge advocate, because I really found it very beneficial to me, particularly, is cryotherapy.
Oh.
If you're not familiar, or if
Yeah.
those watching or listening aren't familiar, it's where you literally get into what looks like this tank contraption, and you stand in this thing, and it almost looks like dry ice because it has kind of smoke in it, but it gets really, really cold, and you're only in it for 3 minutes. But after you're done, it's the most immediate, anti-inflammatory, helping with any kind of soreness or inflammation that you're struggling with. And it really helped me get through those 8-show week schedules.
Wow. Now, you mentioned something talking about energy, and for anybody who doesn't know the kind of people who kind of thrive in musical theater and Broadway, you have to have a ton of energy.
Yeah.
I remember because I've done a fair number of Broadway calls, and I remember seeing, you always see the same group of people at every single audition who get, some stay the whole way through or some partly, but it's still the same group of people. And I don't know what they eat for breakfast, but there's something in those pancakes that they eat, because I have a lot of energy, and I have a very, systematic way of going through the day, but it was just at 200% all the time.
Yes.
And especially if you're going to do 8 shows a day, you need to have that kind of energy and that kind of frequency. And it was kind of part of the reason why I didn't want to really dive into musical theater, because I knew who I was. Mm-hmm. And, being a ballet dancer before all this, I would be doing Nutcracker, and maybe I would do 5-6 shows a week. And that was oh God, I can't wait till this runs over. And then doing 8 shows, being 200% all the time, it wasn't for me. But I know a lot of people really love it. And the thing that I really did not like was that whole aspect that you just talked about, where you could go and, take a bus and wait outside for a dance call and be there all day and never be seen.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started going to some Broadway calls, I wasn't a part of any union, and I forget what show it was, but I guess it doesn't matter. That happened to me, and I was there for 10 hours, and I wasn't seen.
Uh,
And I was
uh,
like, oh, you're not looking at non-union. Oh, okay. And I was so pissed, and I went, God dang it, I need to get into some sort of union just to get in the door. And I found out that a lot of dancers are a part of AGMA, which has an affiliation with Equity.
mhm,
And because of my experience as a ballet dancer, I was able to get AGMA.
mm.
And because of that, I could go at least be in the room every single time. Even though I was considered non-union, would still be put into the group with all the Equity actors and dancers. Um,
Absolutely.
and I mean, sure, you have to pay dues for all that, but it's a whole lot better than wasting an entire day in New York. So
Yes,
if anybody who's listening and is a dancer or has some sort of way of getting an AGMA, that's one way to do it without being invited into Equity.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they also Equity does their EMC program. It's where if you're a part of that, that if you are getting these theaters or projects or gigs that will correlate with that,
Yeah.
you would build up points for each week of work that you would get. And once you get to, I think it's 50.
You're right.
It's been too long since, yeah.
Yeah.
But I believe it's like 50 points, and then you are eligible to join. Or the best way, if you can get seen, whether you're union or not, but if you're not union or EMC, if you get that gig that requires everybody of the company to be a part of Equity, and then they like have to offer it to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great way of getting it. That's actually how I got mine.
Really?
I was working at the Muni in St. Louis, which has now become a really
It's pretty big now.
prominent regional theater in the country. I was kind of there in its earlier transition into what it is now, and
Because you're
yeah,
so old, that was an ancient time,
it's been around for over 100 years, and it's
The
shocking to me.
theater. No,
Like,
I meant you. I meant you because
oh yes,
you're
old timer here. Um, but yeah, no, the summer after I graduated college, I had my first gig at the Muni there, and they offered me my Equity card with Shrek the Musical. It was a lot of fun.
There's so many musicals that I look at and I'm like, how did that get produced? Like I remember there was like the SpongeBob one.
Oh yeah,
What was the Margaritaville something?
came from Margaritaville. Jimmy Buffett
Yeah,
decided to make a show about his music.
and I just went like, okay, what were the shows that weren't picked up? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like who's the one they're like, okay, we're not that we're gonna draw a line in the sand here, we're not gonna do that. Like what is that? Like what got put on the scrap on the cutting room table? I just want to know that.
I do too. It's fascinating because there are some shows where you literally have to like tilt your head a little bit at
Yeah.
like not just one, but like a group of people had
Yeah.
to sign on this saying like this is a good idea.
Yeah.
This will make money. At least in the Broadway realm of things, it's a
Yeah.
commercial business, so that they're aiming to try to make their money back and make a profit. So it's
Yeah.
just like,
And that's
huh?
and that's a good segue because a lot of people don't realize the business behind musical theater. Each show is kind of its own entity in terms of money making, and a lot of times people go and see a show and they only see the talent that's on the stage and they don't see the not just the people behind the scenes but the producers and the media companies and the contracts with theaters, and so are you familiar with any of that? Have you like had any kind of experience as a performer where things didn't go or things went a certain way just because of the business?
Yeah,
People may not realize.
yeah, it totally is a business, and that's why we call it the entertainment business. And
Yeah.
sometimes we forget that, just because those of us that are like as performers, it's a passion of ours. Like we can't think of doing anything else. So when something that is more like systematic or logistic kind of decisions being made, it might not always make sense to us at the time. Um, but yeah, there were times like my first Broadway show was the revival of On the Town back in 2014, and that show has a very special place in my heart. But in terms of this, what we're talking about now, there were moments during our run. We ran for just shy of a year.
Okay.
And there was a section of our run, and we were performing at the Lyric Theater, which is where the Harry Potter play is right now. It's the largest theater on Broadway in terms of seats and capacity. And for the month of like February, late January, I think that year was a crazy snowpocalypse, what we called it. It was, or like really bad conditions. And we were sometimes the theater can hold up to 1,900 seats. There were some shows and even weeks where we were playing to like 400 people. So it felt a much different atmosphere performing in that. But the difference is our producers, instead of just calling up quits right there, just saying we can just close right now because I don't think we're going to get our money back, they just loved the show so much. They just had a personal connection to it, rather seeing it as like the business side and the money and the numbers, that they put in more money to allow us to pay the theater rent and everything so that we could continue on through the summer and hopefully make more money. So that was just a different way of approaching it in a business standpoint. Then there was another time with American in Paris, which was my second Broadway show. By the time I joined, I was there for, several weeks, probably close to a month. And they were at the point, because they'd already been running for a year and a half at that point.
Right.
And they were starting to get into their like financials. What do we do? Do we try to stay open, or do we go out on a high note and go on our own terms? And they decided that they were going to close in January, but that gave us, several months of notice, which is great for us as performers. Right. It's like, okay, we know we have it for this long, but we can also start looking for other gigs or trying to look to those opportunities. But then they weren't expecting, they were trying to see if they could get more money by announcing closing that led up to the holidays.
Right.
But they weren't seeing that shift that they wanted. So they actually said, just kidding, we're going to close in the end of October. Oh. So like, we had 2 closing notices, like meetings with that show. But they actually were smart, because when they did that, there was a huge spike in tickets, because they're like, oh, we only have now several weeks to see the show, like people that hadn't seen it or what. So that's just like a decision on their end, the folks that do all of the producing and managing of it, and like affecting us in a weird way. Like, oh my gosh, like, okay, we're closing sooner than expected. And then there's also the fact, which it hasn't happened to me necessarily in the shows I've done, but like what we are seeing more recently with Beetlejuice, the musical, where they've been selling great in terms of ticket sales and a following on social media and all of these things that are components of making a show like a success. But because another producer had made like, behind closed doors, like agreements of that space with the theater owners, because that's another thing that a lot of us in the business will forget, that all the Broadway theaters are owned by 3 different families or groups: the Schuberts, the Niederlander, and one more.
I don't know.
We can look that up later. Right. But there's 3 of them, and they already decided to put in the Music Man revival, which, depending on what's happening now in our day and age, I don't know when that's going to open, but they had already made this decision to put that in the fall of this year. So they were kicking out a show that was already doing well, and that has nothing to do with the like producers' decisions or anything, because it's Warner Brothers Theatrical that produced it. But it was the theater owners that are actually like, we have the final say. So there's a lot of aspects to our entertainment business that sometimes we forget.
And I bet you a lot of relationships can get very sour very quickly because of certain things like that.
And that's a very valid point, because, and going back to what you said, even in auditions, like I'm seeing it so much now, but the longer that you're in the business, the smaller the world gets, and so many more, you know, so many more people, and like you're, instead of 6 degrees of separation, you're like 1 degree, or you literally know this person or have met this person or done a gig. So you really want to tread lightly in terms of, if there does have to be a difficult decision made, that you want to try not to, you know, cut any bridges or whatnot, because most of the time there's going to be opportunities that will bring people back together.
Yeah.
And that's also in terms of just reputation, and what I try to hold myself to, and hopefully many others, to just try to be a good sport and do your job as best you can, and try to, you know, be a good work companion,
A good co-host, a good co-worker, a good performer, someone to get along with, somebody that if something goes wrong on stage, you know what to do, they know what to do. Yes, it's all about it. It's more of a family than anything. I find that, especially more in theater, that it doesn't matter like where you come from or who you are or how you are. You know, what really counts is how you work.
Yeah.
In the theater.
Exactly.
And you know, it doesn't matter what you used to be, it's what you are and how you're doing it. I think I love that aspect of the theater world. Now, have you done anything other than theater? Have you branched out in doing film or some TV work or commercials or teaching?
Yeah, you know, I knock on wood, I have been very fortunate in the theater realm that has been keeping me very busy, and I'm very grateful for that. And it's something that I do love. But I'm also not against, or I'm fascinated and would like to experience more of these things that you've asked about: TV, film, or even voiceover work. I think that's fun and fascinating.
Oh, I think you would do great in voiceover work.
I would love that, or even like read a book if they want me to do a audio book. I'm not even opposed to that. So like, that's why I think I definitely am in the right business, just because all of that fascinates me. And yeah. So in terms of film, I have yet to really dive into that. And television, there's actually been opportunities through theater and these Broadway shows where I've gotten to be on like Good Morning America and the Tony Awards and the Today Show and Macy's Day Parade. So like getting to see that kind of live national television kind of atmosphere while still like doing a number from a show that I'm in. So I've gotten to do that. There's little snippets of kind of random things, like I had to dance in an episode for this Hulu show that was like a reunion episode for what was like a web series, but it's all like theater people came up with a show and whatnot. But like, yeah, it hasn't gotten much into that yet, but I'm hopeful. And once everything in our current situation hopefully dies down and gets under control, and we can get back to the swing of things, that can be something that I can explore more.
But even like right now is a perfect time to start thinking about, you know, voiceover or more audio based performing. Yeah, that would be Yeah, I can totally see you doing that because you're also an accomplished singer as well.
Yes,
So,
that has been
the
a
control
process
of,
years.
yeah. I think I don't even think you need to wait for an opportunity. I think that you can just like take a book you really like, or some sort of dialogue that you really enjoy, and just sit in your little bunker with your microphone and just make it, and that can be your demo.
For sure.
And
That's
then you can go off to different agents, or if there's a however audition um,
mhm,
situation, you can just be like, oh, I also do voiceover work. I also
yeah.
do this thing because I developed it during quarantine and blah 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 blah. I think that you would I think that would be a very good thing for you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think I'm not opposed to it at all.
Yeah, I mean, I've
And
I've done a few voiceover auditions,
sure.
and I mean, I don't have a home studio. I don't have, I'm really, it's like in my closet with a blanket over me and
Yep.
my USB microphone, with my phone, looking at the lines as I'm doing it.
Yes.
It's the funniest thing, but I mean, yeah, it's a whole other world out there, especially now that everything's all digital. It's
Yeah.
so easy to put out content. But anyway, yeah, yeah.
Well, and
Um, yeah.
I think that's important that you said that too, because even after all of this, like it more than likely won't be what it was before, or like the same. So the fact that there's so much of this, even what we're doing right now, this kind of digital connection, that there's going to be ways that this will be integrated into all of our uh, aspects in society, I think, and even in the arts. Like, I'm not sure how it's all going to unfold yet. Like, that's kind of exciting to think about, but yeah. Um, and the fact that we have these tools at our disposal with like microphones and these high quality laptops, that we can actually try to make these things for ourselves. Because even though some people might or might not have agents or managers, when it all comes down to it, in terms of our business, it's just the the best person that's going to look out for you is yourself. And if there's any way that you can make that happen for yourself, like learning these tools to create a demo, to collaborate with people, and even making it just like, I want to do this just cuz, and if it connects you to somebody else in the business that's thinking of somebody like you for a project or whatnot. So at the end of the day, even with an agent that I have, I'm always trying to think like, what can I do? How can I um, get myself out there?
And I'm the same way. I have representation as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's a lot of things that actors need to do in order to show themselves. And it's not just, waiting for the phone to ring for a producer to give you a role or something like that. I unless you're like, I don't know, an Academy Award winning actor, that's not going to happen for the majority of us.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, what's been great is just knowing how to talk to people, like
Yes.
call on the phone or send an email or DM them on Instagram, or reach out to them some other way. Like it's not about waiting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about waiting. It
Yeah.
might take you a while before an opportunity comes,
Of
but
course.
it's not about waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to jumpstart it yourself, like whatever you can on your end, to like what you can control, because there's so much of our business that we can't, like in terms of going back to like auditioning. And I'm still a culprit of this. I'm always trying to help myself with this, but we'll always get in our heads of like, oh, that could have been better, or maybe they thought of this. But once you put yourself out there, you do your audition and leave, all we can hope for is that we had enough time prior, like to the notification about the audition, to prepare. We go in and do what we can because we are in control of this, and then we have to let it go. But we still struggle mentally of like, oh, the thoughts of like are clearly out of our control, but maybe thinking about it might affect how the outcome is or whatnot. So yeah, it's a internal struggle, I'm sure, for many.
Yeah.
But,
Do you
yeah.
have any audition like horror stories or like something you booked that you did that you thought you did terrible in the audition? Like, do you have a story?
um, well, I mean, for all of us, the word no or the not hearing anything and just not getting the gig is a lot more constant, even
Yeah.
for someone like me who has been very lucky. But one that comes to mind was there was an audition for, gosh, I'm forgetting what the show like was called, but some sort of jukebox type of musical, like songs from a band, a British band, but not the Beatles. Um,
Rolling Stones,
it was
Monkeys.
the the song "Woke Up This Morning." Something tells me I'm into something good. That song, "Something tells me I'm into something good." Whoever that band was. Anyway, so I get this like material, and it's like 5 songs, 6 different scenes, and it's all I get it, 2 days before the audition naturally. And I get there and I try to be as familiar as I can. And I start with one song, and they're like, "Oh, then sing this song as well." And it was probably like the least one I looked at. So I had to like go over to the piano and look over the guy's shoulder to like kind of figure out where I was and kind of sight read.
Yeah.
And all of those 5 or 6 scenes, I was, they said, get familiar with all of them. And then I was like prepared to have them tell me like, we want you to read the scene for us. And it's like, okay, at least that's not my decision and I'll just go for it. And then they go, which scene would you like to read? Which one do you feel most connected to? I was like, I was trying to get familiar with all of them so I don't have one that I feel really powerfully about. So it's like, I guess this one. And oh God, it was just such a nightmare.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Yeah. And it was, the notorious,
Oh.
those of us in an audition room, like after that, just like,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, Thanks so much. And just darted out of that room as fast as I could.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, we've all had one of those auditions where they ask so much and they're so vague about what they actually want you to do in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I did it's actually in it's actually in post-production right now. I don't know if I can say what the name is.
Oh, please.
But it's a Netflix series that's supposed to come out. It's called Tiny Pretty Things.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And this was when I was first like really pivoting to acting. So I didn't really have much of an agent. I didn't have like a resume with it really any sort of film credits. I didn't have a whole even like a reel. I didn't have a reel. I had myself dancing, and I had all those materials. And for some reason, and anyway, my stuff got put on the desk of the producer, and the person that I was in contact with, she just said, "Oh, why don't you make self tapes for these 3 characters?" Now, each character had 2 to 3 scenes, each like 5 minutes long, so like long scenes for a self tape. Plus, they wanted me to put together a very specific dance reel, very like of specific combinations, and it was maybe like a 10-minute long, basically an entire class. But like they wanted the right kind of music with the right tempo, and these certain ballet steps.
Right.
And they gave me a week
Oh,
to submit
of
it.
course.
And I was like, who do you think you are? Like, but then I was like, all right, this is not, this is just, you just drop everything, you make it work. I was able to like rent out a studio for like an hour or two with my boombox, and I did the thing. And I went to my acting coach. I was like, I need your help. Help me now. And I remember like staying up and for a couple days learning all these lines. I get it all done. I, put it all together. I send it out, and then I hear nothing.
Yep.
And I went, oh, okay. So this is what it is. And it was like, this was maybe like one of my first things of like real, like a serious role that I got, like invited to. And I went, oh, so no feedback, nothing.
Mm-mm.
Now, as I'm more into it, I realized maybe I didn't get feedback because I didn't have an agent. So there was no way of really communicating with me. Also, even though I was reading for 3 people, one person had a Southern accent and the other person was French. So I had to kind of have 2 different accents plus a third role. So it was like, I had to have this huge range to start with. And maybe they were like, yo, even though we might like this kid, he doesn't have any experience. So we're not even going to ask him to come in.
Oh God.
It's and so one of those things where it was like, you did something and you feel like you put all this work in and then nothing happens.
I know. No, it really is a tough business.
It's what it is.
I know.
Yeah.
You like I said, all we can hope for is that we do have enough time to prep for, and naturally, like, of course, it's always feels like it's last minute. Or what was it? One of my more recent auditions, before everything shut down, was I got a notification for a final callback for something. It was a day and a half prior, and I was already scheduled to be out of town. I was actually here, and I had to. First, they asked if I could like go in another day because I was scheduled to be here through the weekend. This was like on a Tuesday evening, and the final callback was on Thursday. And they're like, well, this is the final callback. They want everybody there. The whole team's going to be there. I was like, okay. So I bought these like last minute flights. This was pre-COVID-19. So those airline tickets were a little expensive. And made it back and did the audition. And the audition itself actually was really enjoyable because it involved everybody that they're considering for this show. And multiple age ranges, so we got to see like even younger kids dance, and then the adults, and it's just really fun. And then come to find out, like even after this investment of going in and all of that, they're just like, and it's not going your way. I was like, oh, and I known that I would not have spent all that money on those flights. Like, so sometimes we win some and we lose some in that regard, even financially. So
yeah.
But we just press on, I guess.
Yeah, you have to, and it's just, it's one of those things. Like you said, there's so much out of our control.
Yep.
Like we don't understand, or like even though we might understand all the different levels and all the different decisions that have to be made. There's times in which you might be right for the role, but the money might go elsewhere, or the decision with the producer is like, oh, we want that to be a female role or something like that. I remember I read for a show, and it was a couple months afterwards that the show came out, and I was able to look up who my role went to, and it was for a female.
Oh wow.
And I was like, oh, that I can't compete with that. Like,
clearly not meant to be.
not meant to be. And it's just odd that, sometimes we realize that maybe casting directors or producers or the directors don't even know concretely what the show's going to be, or who they're going to cast, or who they want. You have to come into the room and give them something that can spark an idea.
Yeah. Another thing that I kind of learned as time went on was that a lot of people put a lot of the kind of focus or the attention on the casting directors themselves, which their role is important in terms of the whole process.
Absolutely.
They have to search the talent, and then they decipher who they think, with the parameters that they've been given, to push them on into the next step in front of the whole team. But for those of us that do make it to those final stages of the audition process, a lot of people will still think like, or they will still think that the casting director is involved in that decision making at that point. And when I come to realize is that actually at that point it's out of their hands. Like they did their part, which was seeing you at the beginning of the process, and it's like, here we found you, and we're going to put you in front of the team, and then it's the team's decision. And I find that fascinating. Even to this day, I'll still hear people say like, I don't know what the folks at Telsey or at Tara Rubin, like I thought we had a strong connection in those early things, and I don't know why it didn't go my way. I thought they were rooting for me, and they very well could like say like, they've been so consistent in all these calls. I know them from this show that I cast them in, and they're great. But it literally comes down to that team. And I'd even say if all of the director, choreographer, all of them are like for this one person, they're like, we just really like him. But if the producer, the guy with the money, the guy or girl with the money,
the suits,
they, I think, will always have the final say.
Yeah, and you know, especially when you're talking about bigger shows in which millions of dollars are at stake.
Yes.
You know, then it's really kind of, it's all about the money and the budget. I mean, there's always a budget that you have to be worried about, but there comes a point in which, you know, okay, this is a huge production, and we can't just give these roles out to whomever we like. You know, we can like somebody as, you know, they might be great and they might look the part and act the part and do all this stuff, but we have this other person who has a more established resume, or who just has more credits, or just, you know, who's been in the business longer, or
is a bigger name so that we can sell more tickets, or like just there's so many factors that they can, you know.
And so there's so much out of our hands, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, it's, you know, it really makes us wonder why anybody does what they do. You know, like, why do we keep going with this? And it's because we love it. Yeah,
that's what it all comes down to. What do we do for love, as they say in Chorus Line?
Yeah. So I know we touched on some things like that, but I always have to ask my guests these two questions. And the first one is, if there's one thing that you could change about the industry, you know, without saying anything that might, you know, hurt you or somebody else or throw anyone on the bus, like, what is one aspect of it that you wish could be like tweaked slightly so that it could be better? It's a hard question, I know.
No, it's a great question. I guess I'd love if, and there's so many hours in the day, and I get that they have to try to make it work, but it really does, like hearing it earlier in our conversation, it just really bums me out hearing about all of these stories. And I have several friends from college and whatnot that, like, the part of the process of getting involved in these shows is getting seen. And I would love it if there was some sort of way, granted, like, you always set up the appointments for people that are in the union, but if they had a separate day or 2 days, or making that process where there theoretically could be more people that are not in the union, but just to have the option to be seen and at least say, like, this is who I am and this is what I've got. I would just love if that was something that would just be the norm, rather than so many people that, and jumping through leaps and bounds of things. Like, I think they're starting to address it now. I'm hearing inklings about trying to do digital signups. But back in the day when people had to get up before the sun rose in the morning to just try to get to these audition studios like Pearl Studios or Ripley Greer, and
been there.
Get there sooner so that they can be earlier on the list in case they even get to that list with the amount of equity people that are seen. Yeah, I would love if everybody just was given an opportunity to be seen.
Yeah.
I think that would be a lovely thing to change or
And
improve.
yeah, I remember because I'm lucky enough to have a family member who lives in Manhattan.
Hmm.
That I remember I went to an audition, and I think the call time was 10 when they were going to start. But I
Hmm.
remember I got there at 6 a.m.
Whew.
My name on the list, just so that I was in line to put myself on the list.
Yep.
Um, I got seen that day, but I think that was only because I was like number 5 of the non-union list, and they were
Yeah.
like, "All right, we'll just."
Mhm.
Um, but still, like, yeah, that would be, especially for musical theater, that would be a great thing, just to be able just to see somebody who, because a lot of times there's some great talent in the non-union aspect that you can actually bring in for a much lower like pay rate just because they're
Mhm.
union, you know.
Mhm.
Not every contract has to be union. um
Right.
yeah, so now the other side of the other question is, what's one thing that you love about what you do?
I love the variety of what we do. It literally, there'll be days when I'm a dancing sailor in the 1940s running around New York City, or I will be uh, an Oompa Loompa in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, or just like there's so many stories to tell.
Yes.
When it comes down to it, we're storytellers,
Yeah.
and that goes almost primal of us as human beings. It goes back so far, like that was the way that we would communicate and connect. And I think that's, whether people know it or not, like that's something that's just embedded in us. So the fact that I get to be a part of that world that is still bringing stories and bringing stories to life, no less, not
Yeah.
just through words, I find very thrilling. And um, in particular with theater, with a lot of the stuff that I've done professionally so far, just that there really isn't anything like live theater with that immediate connection and response of people sitting in a theater watching you do what you do. And um, there's I love that it's happening now in at least New York City. I hope it's spreading. But every night, I think at 7 p.m. Manhattan, a lot of people go out and clap at 7 for the medical workers and people
Yeah.
that are on the front lines right now. But um, I've had little side chats with people that, and colleagues and friends, that just during bow sequences, like when we are done with our day of work, it's just like, this is not a bad thing at all. Like, uh, not everybody that does their work and does it well has hundreds or thousands of people, like, and if we're lucky, we'll get up off their feet and truly like applaud you for your work. And that's it's a really cool thing to experience.
It's very, very nice. Now, as you were talking, I just had to ask this question: is there a show that you really want to be on that you haven't been done yet?
Mm. Um, well, in the current lineup of shows that are either in the works or about to come in, I don't know. I feel like um, I resonate well with the classic or the old school type of shows. Nothing against the newer, more contemporary shows, and I love going to them. And if people think I can be right for them, like, I will not say no. I'll happily take it on. But I do have a particular love for classics and revivals, older shows,
Yeah.
MGM style, like the movie musicals, if any of those are on stage. So at least in the shows that were up and coming or about to happen, like Music Man, I really resonate with. Like, that would be a show I'd love to be.
I think that was my first musical I ever saw.
Really?
I really think that was my first musical.
Well,
First Broadway musical for sure. I know that.
well, yeah. My first Broadway show was Lion King, actually.
Oh,
That was when it was still at the New Amsterdam Theater, the theater that Disney
yeah.
owned. But that's where Aladdin the musical is now. They transferred Lion King to another theater where they've totally decked it out and made it permanent, because that's also one of those government jobs that people talk about. It's not going anywhere. But yeah,
Music Man.
Music Man in that regard. But in terms of like parts and things that I dream of wanting to do someday, one that really immediately comes to mind is heavily inspired by the original man who did it, but also seeing it on Broadway. But I'd love to do Bert and Mary Poppins one day.
Oh,
A mixture of I'm a Disney boy. I love Disney stuff. So that, but he's a tapper. He has such a kind of positive,
yeah.
like, part to him, and he also narrator of the show, so he breaks the fourth wall.
Mm-hmm.
He tap dances on this. Oh, that's a spoiler. People don't know the show. He does a really cool trick in Step in Time. But yeah, like that would be a really fun, because I, of course, would love to take on any challenge of any type of role, but I do have a personal love being a dancer at the beginning to do song and dance man type of roles.
Yeah.
So that's one. And then another one, again, inspired by the guy who did it originally in the film. But the Scarecrow and the Wizard of Oz, which is also very like movement, like you have to have such control of, even though it looks all kind of loose and goosey, I would just love to dive into that and to figure out my version of how to move like that. And the story is such a timeless classic. So
amazing. And those are all good roles for you too.
Yay! So
Yeah.
anyone watching or listening, if you're thinking of producing either of those shows,
This is all just a ploy just to get you those roles. That's all this is for. A long time.
Yeah.
For me, I probably want to do. I love Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
I could do Book of Mormon. I would love it. Yeah. I do love the classics, but Book of Mormon is just. Oh,
that's perfect for you.
That's
hello, ding dong.
Hello. Yeah. So before we go, if you could give advice either to seasoned actors, performers, or people just starting off, or even if you want to talk to a younger you, what would you say?
It's funny. I should expect like a question like this to pop up, and it's always what I say, or what are kind of words of wisdom or advice. I would say, first of all, in our current climate, to not lose hope. We what we do ignites hope because it allows people to escape. So people, especially now, know how important, at least I hope they do, know the importance of the arts and how much it's integrated into our lives as in a society, and also just as human beings, again, storytellers. And that we need it. And so many people, Netflix, like you said earlier, like is booming right now. Yeah. There's people want to find a way to be entertained, and so it's not going to go away, even though it seems like, when is it happening again? It will come back. It might have evolved in some way, but it'll be there. I would say to for a younger version of me, get ready. You have no idea what's in store, because I would always, try to have some dreams of like what could be, or I always had a vivid imagination growing up. So it makes sense that I'm in this business.
As did I.
But yes.
Yeah.
but I never would have imagined or expected what has transpired for me in this world of theater so far, and what will hopefully continue to do. Like, I still have no clue what's in store, but I'm excited for it. So no matter what, just keep going on. And I guess in general, and even folks that do it or would like to do it, like I mentioned earlier, the world, the entertainment business world gets smaller and smaller every day the longer you're in it. So the fact that you want to work on anything that can make you a really good coworker, try to show up, do your thing, working hard, being a good hang, so to speak, somebody that people would enjoy collaborating with is a huge deal. And just trying to, keep that reputation of somebody that it's like that guy or that gal. They're just always such a joy. Yeah. And it'll take you far in any line of work, but especially in this. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. And we've given this precious gift of time in these isolation quarantine times and I get it. I've witnessed people and friends and colleagues that almost feel like, do I have to use this time to make something or create? And I get that. Like, there's times here being at home that I just love I like describing it as this like stillness where I'm just literally present with my family, and that's important too, and time of reflection. And then I'll also get these waves of, all right, what can I create? What's going to be the next thing after? Like, how can I do this? Or, oh, I'd love to collaborate with this person. And like, so there's that too. And then there's, if you're not as confident in a skill, like right now is the perfect time to just practice on it. And there's so many virtual aspects now with online dance classes, or if you want to work on your voice or work on creating your own demo reel, and like there's ways so that you can be productive and as marketable as you can. And I firmly believe in that. When I was in college, I took as many classes as I could. I took group piano for an extra semester just so that I was better familiar with music. Yeah. And like sight reading and things. I still am not all that good, but that will just make yourself as marketable as you can for people that are in positions of offering roles and projects to you. So that was a lot. I feel like I just spewed out so much, and I don't know if it all
beautiful
went into a cohesive thought, if it was all over the place, but documented somewhere here that people can look back and be like, okay, that makes sense if you play it.
And even if it wasn't cohesive, it was, you put it out there, like you just did it. So I really appreciate you taking some time. I know that you have an incredibly busy schedule, just hanging out at home all the time.
So busy. Don't we all? Oh God.
But yeah, all the best. I hope that you're on stage soon. I hope that you get to, go into those different avenues that you've been thinking about, that we talked a little bit about. Hope so. And yeah, all the best, and stay safe out there.
Thank you. You too. This was such a joy. I really was looking forward to chatting with you about all this. And yeah, well,
I really think that people got some good energy from this. So yeah, thanks again.
Absolutely. Yeah.